When the pardoner had been sent packing for the formidable widow, he turned his attention to the knight.
"Sir, I can see you are a God-fearing man as I've set knee to a church floor. Here you are riding to Canterbury in hope of a blessing, and here I am with a pack full of holy objects, all honeyed over with blessings for a man who touches them. Give me a crown, and I'll let you see the headcloth of Holy Virgin herself, and I'll throw in a glimpse of the St. Sebastian thigh bone preserved in alcohol."
"Thank you, sir," said the knight, who was always polite, even to fools. "But last year I stood in Jerusalem itself and saw the garden where our Lord Jesu was laid, and where he rose to life again. I saw the field where Blessed George's cross flamed in the sky before the Crusaders' victory over the infidel. I don't know but that your veil and thigh bone will be a disappointment after that." The sea captain was much less polite. "When I was sailing it down on the Red Sea, I sank a ship carrying 200 holy grails, a flock of sheep's bones, and each one bottled and labelled with a different saint's name, and enough splinters from our cross to build Noah's Ark all over again. As for Our Lady's headcloth, that's all supposing she dressed like the widow here. I've seen enough to make sails for the English fleet." "Are you calling my friend a liar?" roared the summoner, pushing his pustular nose in. The captain reeled at the smell of raw garlic, but was unabashed. "Yes, I am calling him a liar and a charlatan." "Ah, well, that's all right then." And the summoner burst into a cacophonous laugh. "Ha ha ha!" The doctor took a look at St. Sebastian's thigh bone, and said it was a pig's trotter.
Well, I bought it in good faith," bleated the pardoner, "and those of you who scoff at us officers of church will all burn in hell."
This threat, even coming from a straggle-haired booby, silenced everyone. The pardoner looked round in triumph, and seeing the chance to drum up a little custom, told us a story about his favourite subject, death. The man Grab was slumped over a table at the Tavern Inn in Southwark. You may know the place. He had wetted his brain in beer, and it weighed heavy. The clanging of the church bell registered dully in his ears. "Who are they burying?" he asked. Old Harry the landlord, who was wiping tables close by, said, "Don't you know? I wondered why you weren't at the funeral, him being a friend of yours. It's Collie the Fence. Caught it last Wednesday and gone today. Him and his wife and his 2 boys. "What?" demanded Grab, grasping Harry's arm. "The Black Death, of course." Then another customer chimed in. "Hey, do they say the plague came to Combleton over yonder, and Death laid his hands on every man, woman, and child, and carried 'em off?" "Where? Carry them where?" demanded Grab, fighting his way through the drink haze like a ghost through cobwebs. "Who knows where Death carries men off to?" said a deeply hooded character sitting in the corner of the bar. "But he sure comes enough for every man in the end, and he's taken twice his share recently, thanks to the plague." Tears of indignation started in Grab's eyes. "I don't see what gives Death the right to go carrying off anyone," he slurred. "And if you ask me, it's about time some brave soul stood up to Death and put an end to his carryings on. His carryings off, I mean. Dip! Cut! Where are you?" And he stumbled off into the sunlight to look for his 2 closest friends. Dip was at home in bed, but not for long. Grab knocked him up and called him into the street. They met with Cut coming home from a card game and cursing his empty pockets. Grab threw an arm over each friend's shoulder. "Have you heard? Oh, Crowley the French is dead. Death carried him off and all his family in a couple of days. Let's take an oath, friends, not to rest until we've tracked down this Death fellow and stuck a knife between his ribs. Think what the mayor and parish would pay if we brought in Death's body. Besides, how many purses do you think he's emptied on the dark highway, eh? Death must have made himself quite a walletful by now." Cut fingered his sharp penknife, the one he used for cutting purses. Dip felt his fingers itch at the promise of rich pickings. "We're with you, neighbor Grab," they cried, and off they reeled, not the sum total of one brain between the three of them. They looked for Death in the graveyard, but decided he must be out hunting the living instead. They looked for Death in the fields, but he had always gone before they arrived, leaving the flowers doomed to wither, and the leaves, sooner or later, to fall. Then, as the daylight failed, they saw the small figure on the roads ahead. "We've gone up to him!" cried Grab, and they fell on the man with flailing fists. "Wait a minute, this isn't Death at all," said Cut, letting his penknife fall. "He's just some silly old duffer. Look at him, he's older than Methuselah." The old man peered at them from out of the dark recesses of his hood. His face was as white and bony as a skull, with purse-string lips and eyes sunk deep in red whorls of wrinkled skin. His hands were as brown as vinegar paper, and his back hunched over like a turtle's shell. "What do you want with me? Don't I have enough to put up with? Can't you leave a poor blighted old creature in peace?" "You're no good to us," Dip said in disgust. "We wanted Death, not some wrinkled old prune on legs." A bitter laugh crinkled out through the creature's gappy ribs. "You want Death? Ah, not as much as I do. I'm the one poor beast alive that Death can't carry off. I'm condemned to live forever and to creep about the earth in this worn-out body, getting older and older and older. And for Death, I've just left him under that oak tree yonder. If you hurry, you'll find him there." Cut's knife was raised again. "So, you've had dealings with him. We'll kill you anyway." The fossil of a man let go a sigh that seemed to break through his brittle skin. "Ah, I wish you could rob me of this tedious burden life. You should pity me, even if you have no respect for my old age. But don't bother to batter on this prison my soul calls a body. You can't free me from it." He shuffled out from under their raised blades, muttering, "You're the lucky ones. You might die today." "Get to bed with the maggots and moles, you old relic of the devil," Grab cursed. "We're on our way to kill Death. Then no one will have to die any more." As soon as the old man was out of sight, the three accomplices forgot him completely. Under the oak tree there was no sign of Death, but there was a pot of money as big as any crock of gold at the rainbow's end. Cut tipped the jar over with his foot, and the wealth of 7 lifetimes spilled out onto the grass. They looked around. No one was even in sight, and there had been no attempt to hide the gold. It lay there, just inviting them to keep it. Grab and Dip and Cut were suddenly rich. "Rich! We're rich! Rich, rich, rich!" As the gold coins spilled out of the jar, so all thought of their plot to kill Death dropped out of their minds. "Dip, your legs are the youngest," said Grab. Run into town and fetch us some wine. We've got to celebrate luck like this." "Why is it always me?" Dip threw a sulky look at the gold, but it was given only 1 coin to buy the makings of a party. "We'll both stay and guard it, don't you worry," Grab assured him. "Be quick, lad, and when you get back we'll decide what we're to do with it all. What mansions we'll build, who to bribe, what monks we'll pay to have done in. We don't have to do our own dirty work from now on, boy. We'll be the 3 kings of the thieves." Full of such thoughts, Dip set off into the dusk to buy cakes and wine. The sun was behind him, and his shadow stretched long and spidery ahead, so that he was all the time stepping into his own darkness. Grab and Cut watched him go, then sat down on either side of the pot of gold. They counted the coins. Somehow it always came out to a different number, 848 or 916 or 772. Grab scowled. "Of course you realize we can't divide it 3 ways." "We can't? You can take my word for it. I won't share out evenly." "It won't? 2 ways, yes. Not 3. One of us will have to take less." "Oh." Cut decided at once that since Dip was the youngest, he should take the smallest share. They both nodded to themselves and settled back to counting the gold. This time there seemed to be 999, or 783, or perhaps 870. It did not change their opinion that Dip should have less. "Of course it won't go far between the three of us," Grab mused. "Not with the cost of living how it is, and you know how Dip squanders money." "No." "He'll soon have spent all his, and he'll be asking to borrow from us." "But I can't spare any of mine," said Cut anxiously. "No more can I. There's little enough to share out between the two, let alone three." They lapsed into silence, and above them the oak's heavy branches groaned while the gold coins clanked between their fingers. "Supposing," said Cut, "just supposing Dip was to meet with an accident on his way back from town." "So many thieves these days," said Grab, nodding sadly. "So many ruffians and murderers." Meanwhile, Dip was watching his shadow move ahead of him on the roadway like a black plow. How big it was! Much bigger than him. When he had his share of the money, he would be a bigger man in every way. No more creeping through the crowds at fairs, cutting purses and catching the pennies that dropped. He could walk tall and stately in fur-trimmed robes, and people would touch their forelocks and step aside. Beggars would fight for the chance to plead with him, and if he felt like it, he could drive them away with pelting of money, and see them grovel in his wake. But if he was going to start giving money away, there would be less for the true necessities: drink and women and gambling. In fact, he could think of so many good uses for the gold that it seemed a pity Cut and Grab had been with him when he found the jar. Really, the more he thought about it, the less fair it seemed that they had bunked in on his good fortune. As he reached the outskirts of the town, he noticed an apothecary's sign hanging over a door. He did not remember ever having seen it before, but he knocked without hesitation.
"What's your trouble, young man, that you roused me from my bed?"
An ancient hairless head poked out of the upstairs window, grotesque and vaguely familiar with its parchment yellow shine. "Rats," said Dip, his head muffled up in his cloak. "The rats are eating me out of the house and home."
"Here, one drop of this will finish them off. Have it for free."
The ancient apothecary must have had the poison in his pocket, for he dropped it down at once into Dip's outstretched hands. "It couldn't be simpler," he called as the boy hurried off to the inn. Dip brought 3 bottles of wine. Every last drop of poison went into 2 of the bottles. The third he marked carefully to be sure of telling it apart. Then he was off to collect his rightful share of the golden hoard, every last coin of it. In the pitch dark of late evening, he stumbled over Cut and Grab, snoozing under the oak tree in the deep grass. "Thought you'd forgotten us," said Grab with a sort of grin. "I wouldn't forget my 2 friends, now, would I?" Dip opened his bottle of wine and took a swig. "Have a drink, why don't you?" Cut and Grab knelt up and groped for the wine, their hands brushing Dip's face in the dark. They moved to either side of their good friend. Along the road came the sudden noise of the plague cart, rattling out of the town towards the lime pits and Ring-a-Rosy Hollow. They all 3 watched its creaking progress beneath the lights of the coachman's torches. Its white cargo of dead bodies joggled against one another like restless sleepers. A limp arm dangling through the cart rails swung to and fro, for all the world as if it was beckoning them. "We took an oath to kill Old Death," said Cut, remembering. "We'll get around to it sometime," said Grab, drawing his dagger. "One thing at a time." He plunged the knife into the back of Dip's neck. It met with the seam of his hood, and the lad looked round in astonishment in time to make out the shape of Cut, outlined against the moon. Then Cut's sharp penknife caught him under the ribs, and he sprawled, cursing, to his death among the gnarled roots of the oak tree. "It's done," Grab panted, and his throat felt suddenly dry. "Let's drink to our partnership, Cut. Where did he put the bottles?" By feeling along the ground, they found the 3 bottles in the long grass. They opened one and emptied itself into the ground, but the others were intact. A bottle apiece, Cut and Grab sat with their backs to the oak tree and drank to their new-found fortune. In the morning, Death came back for his pot of gold. He wrapped it in the miserable rags of his decaying cloak, close to his gappy ribs. The 3 corpses under the tree made no move to stop him, and he left them to a wealth of flies and crows before continuing his endless journey. The gold weighed light in his arms. Though his bones were dry and his muscles were like the withered tendrils of a grapeless vine, his strength was immense. He could carry off the biggest or strongest of men, even though, like any man or beast, he could never carry off himself.
"Remember,"
said the podner, intoning through his nose in his best Sunday bleat,
"death is the only crossroads at which we take the road up to heaven or down to hell."
He accompanied this with the sawing movements of his hands, with his sticky white palms, and surrounded by his bottled and bagged relics. He put me in a mind of a conjurer performing tricks. But by the time the podner had finished his macabre story, large numbers of pilgrims had dropped back to ride in a bunch at the rear. Comforting drink was circulating, and the cook was already flat on his back with his head lolling on the roots of his horse's tail. "God's good mercy on us miserable sinners!" he cheered, and as the haberdasher tried to pour wine into his mouth, choked and fell off.
"Why, St. Lord, what a nasty story,"
said Prioress Angleton.
"My little wolf didn't like that one bit."
Her lapdog accordingly growled at the pardoner from his pummel of a nun's saddle. But the summoner took great delight in his friend's story and burst into song. "Sleep, little my lovely, and wake with a smile. Death is forever, life's only a while." The pardoner joined in, his blonde lashes straining like exclamation marks round his bulging blue eyes. "Death is forever, life's only a while." Angrily, the miller drowned them out with a frenzied lament on the bagpipes, and the sea captain could be seen on the skyline, keeping his distance until the subject of death had been well and truly dropped. I noticed during the course of the afternoon that certain of the pilgrims slipped furtive coins into the pardoner's hands, and were allowed to peep into his baggage or touch one of his worthless fakes. I suppose that's how he carries on in the country churches each Sunday, scarring the congregation witless with the talk of death and hell, then letting them buy back their peace of mind with their hard-earned pennies. Myself, I wish you could get nearer to heaven by touching a bottleful of pickled pig's trotters or half an old pillowcase.